Divorce can be one of life's most difficult and uncertain times, but there is a way forward.
Divorce is one of those things that's pretty unique. Individuals aren't necessarily prepared for being so emotionally destabilized. Do I have enough money? Am I going to be able to live in the same house that I've always lived in?
You get to the end of the conversation and they're smiling through the tears. We can help by being there on their side through this as fellow human beings.
Welcome to The Power of Good Advice, a series built on a simple belief. Good advice shouldn't be kept behind closed doors. Everyone deserves to have clarity, to feel confident, to build a prosperous future, and to unlock the good advice that can lead you there. We believe wealth isn't just about numbers, it's about your goals, the people who matter to you, and the life you want to build. I'm Katie Derham, and I'm joined by two leading experts from Evelyn Partners, Head of Family and Divorce, Ben Glassman, and Investment Management Partner, Lucy Taylor. Hello to you both. When a life-changing event happens, it can feel unsettling, confusing and chaotic. But often an event that seems wholly negative to begin with can end up bringing unexpected positives. And today we're looking at divorce and separation and how they have the power, hard as it might seem at the time, to lead to new confidence and control for wealth and well-being. I have to ask you, obviously nobody gets married and dreams of the day they get divorced. Of course they don't want to be in this position, but around 4 in 10 marriages in the UK do end in divorce. Ben, let's start with you. You must see an awful lot of people who desperately need your help at what is a very difficult time.
Yeah, no one sets out to get divorced. And divorce is one of those things it's pretty unique. Individuals aren't necessarily prepared for being so emotionally destabilized by a divorce. Not because they haven't got the education or the knowledge, it's just they haven't been through that experience and emotions can take hold. So when people come meet us, invariably they're thinking about some fundamental questions. Do I have enough money? Am I going to be able to live in the same house that I've always lived in? What happens to school fees and paying for education of my children? And there's loads of things that they're coming to us and invariably are worried they're going to make the wrong decision at exactly the wrong time. And that's where hopefully financial planning and investment managers can help them in that journey.
Which is where you come in, Lucy, of course. So tell me about some of the people who you meet day to day.
I think sometimes, this is one of those life makes sense in the rearview mirror moments. I went into this world because I wanted to enable financially whatever good looks like for clients of all sorts of clients. But actually, when you've done it for several decades, as we both have, you end up walking alongside clients going through several life events. And what I've come to realize over the years is that it works both ways. We gain a huge amount of wisdom and life experience from those clients. But several years ago, I found myself going through this divorce journey with an existing client who was a very senior and experienced, high-powered lawyer herself, having it all, grown-up children, husband who also worked very hard, and I just looked after her finances, which were always very separate to her husband's. And then one day, I turned up for a review meeting, as we did regularly, and she dropped this bombshell, which had been dropped on her, that, in fact, they were separating and they were going to go through divorce. So it isn't always the case that it is. Often a life event will bounce someone into having to have a conversation about their finances. But if there is a mission, one of them is to try and help people to have their finances and possibly legal affairs as well in order so that they have a plan, so that when one of life's waves comes along, which they do, and there probably will be more, you can actually feel that you have a plan in place already rather than you're bounced into something.
So when people come to you and they're going through this process, they may be referred by a solicitor or they may already be existing clients. How then does it work between the roles that you have, Ben, and Lucy? How does that get divvied up?
So we do our best work when we're working collaboratively, whether that's internally or with external individuals like solicitors. The divorce coach is also a really important role, actually, which has come about over the last 10, 20 years. But we are there initially during the negotiation period, during the divorce process to assist. So that could be a technical piece of work around what we do with some complicated pensions. Private equity is another thing that we've seen more recently. But it's also to provide reassurance and clarity about what the post-settlement world looks like. And that itself can just give some reassurance that I'm going to be okay, or answer some of those fundamental questions. And so what lawyers sometimes might ask us around is, we're going to go and negotiate, or we're going to go mediate. Why don't we understand what our best case scenario might look like? Like, that would be great. We'd definitely accept that. What is an acceptable kind of a amber world? And what do we have to walk away from? Like, what is not going to be sufficient to enable us to meet our longer term objectives?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's where the role of a financial planner in particular can really assist to provide that clarity, provide that understanding, and to answer some of these more fundamental questions about, will I have enough? Can I stay in the family home? What compromises might need to be made further down the line if those two are immovable?
I mean, it does strike me this is a role that, perhaps surprisingly to some listeners, it requires a lot of empathy, doesn't it? It really does. Did you ever imagine, Ben, that you were going to have to be really a counsellor and a psychologist as well as a financial planner?
Absolutely. I mean, all of the people in our team, all of the practitioners at Evelyn Partners, they fundamentally understand the importance of empathy in this role, whether it's right or wrong. But every divorce client that comes through the door, we think of them as being vulnerable. They're in a state of fight or flight. They're concerned about how much maybe the divorce is maybe costing them, what their financial future looks like. And the financially more vulnerable party may never have dealt with the finances before. And we are terrible as an industry in terms of overwhelming people with acronyms and various different things that you might think you have to understand before you get to reach a decision. So we take our time, we take a step back, we sit and listen. And this goes for all of our practitioners, even our most technical practitioners. Understand that we have to listen to what's important and who's important for our clients. And it's only once we've done that, then we can understand about how we build a plan out for them. And it may be the plan, even at the point of settlement, and we might talk about this further, is we're not going to do anything. You're not in a position, or you're not feel comfortable about talking about investments, equities, bonds. We can go through a whole load of other things that we could be talking about, but it's not the right time. And it's only when clients, they come to a realization, well, actually, maybe I am more comfortable about our financial future, that we'll start engaging in a conversation about maybe the more technical details.
It sounds so simple, but it's actually really hard to resist the temptation to when you're faced with someone, we know we've got the ingredients, we know we've got the recipes, we know we can help, but actually the last thing we should do is rush in and fix everything. We need to take them on a journey. And there is a huge, huge difference between being financially secure, and this is where, we're happy and familiar with numbers and familiar with this world, where we can look at a settlement and think, actually, that's probably going to be okay, and feeling financially secure. And that's why, exactly as you say, it is so much more about understanding and meeting that person who's in front of you, understanding how they're feeling, and working out for them. Everyone's different, but based on the experience and having walked the walk and done this with people over many, many years, many times, always differently. But, a lot of themes come out.
And that can go on for years, Lucy. I mean, I have a client. She's one of my favourite clients.
You're not meant to have favourites.
Well, I do. She sits one of those. And it's 10 years after her divorce. And she had a really toxic divorce. But she's still living with the fallout from that. And it still comes up in meetings today. So that point about being emotive, and it goes on for years. And she has spent the last decade becoming really knowledgeable about investments, to the point where now she completely trusts her investment manager, because she understands, but that's taken a decade for her to get to that position, but she still worries she's going to run out of money. And there are things that we can do, maybe we'll talk about some of those, that we can kind of reassure. For that client, we might talk about it a bit further, but it's so lovely that she can give money to her children to help them buy property. There's so many lovely things that have come out of it, but it's come from a really, terrible place for her. And it's something that's been emotionally scarring for her for the last, 10 years.
And from your point of view, both of you, was it difficult when you first started dealing with people who, as you say, very emotional, very vulnerable, who needed help? But, did you feel prepared for that when clients first approached you for that help and support?
We have lots of clients who go through bereavement as well.
Yeah.
And to some degree, it's that loss, isn't it? Of, as you said, Katie, right at the beginning, no one goes into a marriage or a partnership ever foreseeing an end to it. It's the same sort of sense of loss of that life that I'd envisioned. There's no shortcut to life experience, is there? And in the nearly 30 years that I've done this, I've been through this with clients, but I've also been through many life events myself. Like it or not, and probably not at the time, it does help you and shape you. And those moments actually where clients, where you get the box of tissues, which is always on hand in a cupboard, where you get the box of tissues out and you get to the end of the conversation and they're smiling through the tears, or a hug at the end of it, because, we can help by really being there on their side through this as fellow human beings.
I mean, do you ever have clients who come in and they're so emotional they just can't hear it? I mean, does that happen sometimes where they're just sort of going, I've got to keep the house, I don't care about anything else?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes.
definitely. And there's quite a lot being written on this particular point, that invariably the financially more vulnerable party in this in most instances is the wife in the marriage, wants to keep the house because it's secure and it's bricks and mortar and it's where the children have grown up, and the husband or the breadwinner wants to keep their pension. And there used to be a lot of concern that people were offsetting a property with offsetting a pension. And people don't understand, and I say that one of the myths or a concern is that £1 million property is not the same as having £1 million worth of pension. How do you capitalise the property? How do you get income from a property? You can't sell a bit of it in order to generate your income. And so sometimes that might be a really important part of the mix for a particular client, but understanding what the compromise might be, if you stick so rigidly to that, it may mean, yes, you can hold on to it, but you're going to have to sell it in 10 years. Are you okay with that? And having those conversations and be able to frame that in terms of where the compromises are becomes a really valuable conversation.
Yeah.
We had one relatively recently, a wonderful lady who came to us, completely an open book in terms of, I'm completely dyslexic, I hate numbers, really uncomfortable about being here. My lawyer said I have to come to talk to you. And we early on had to sort of say to her, you have an awful lot of money tied up in this house. No, absolutely, I've got to live where we've always lived. I've got, the 3 boys, they take up lots of room. This is what we're doing, which leaves me with a relatively small pot. And she quite quickly knew what income she needed. We were able to say to her, right, okay, so these are the realities of the situation, and on that financial sat-nav, she could see that by having all this part of her settlement tied up in something, in bricks and mortar, which made her feel comfortable and secure, it was really compromising her freedom and her ability to make decisions and actually really embark on this new chapter. And actually, the children were grown up. They were going to be fleeing that nest anyway quite soon. I think she didn't really want to face up to that. But it was interesting because it landed and we just set it out. We said, we don't have to make any decisions now. And actually, myself and the planner were sort of saying, we probably need to address this in the next 2 to 5 years. Within a year, she came back to us and she said, I understood what you said and I'm going to downsize. It doesn't serve me to have all this money tied up in a house. But that was definitely the sort of client who, without seeing it represented and being able to sort of kick the tires and change the assumptions and see, what this really means, you can't make those decisions in anything that feels like an informed way.
So for people who are listening or watching this discussion who may be perhaps about to embark on this process or thinking that might be coming down the line, what should they be expecting you to be asking them in these conversations when you're trying to lay out the options for them and asking, what are the first things that they're going to have to face?
Okay. I mean, firstly, those initial conversations are always around us listening and the kind of things we're going to be asking about who's important to you, right? What's important? Is it around property? Is it important that you educate your children? Is it important that you're able to gift more money? I think fundamentally we're always focusing on what the level of spend. Because for many individuals, the settlement might be the only capital inflow that they have during their lifetime. So how is that going to last you?
Yeah.
We also want to be thinking about levels of risk that someone might want to be able to take. And that level of risk is going to change as well, particularly as they become more comfortable and more knowledgeable about the world that we're in. But we would not be rushing to a lot of this. Divorce isn't necessarily about splitting up assets, but what we are there to do is to rebuild that stability. That world view is now changed. How to ensure that individual is comfortable, and the importance of having planning early on in that process, I think, really helps. But I find that sometimes too much investment management discussion probably hinders. So a first conversation is going to be about understanding an individual, getting things out on the table, hopes, dreams, fears. We're completely in listening mode. We're not going to get the answer on day one, but we can start building a process towards a plan that's going to enable to achieve some of those goals.
And as you mentioned, Lucy, I mean, the book has to be completely wide open, doesn't it? It has to be transparent. Everybody's assets need to be out on the table, don't they?
Yes. And I think, it isn't about investment conversations, absolutely, at this stage. But obviously, a magic rule of investment is the compounding of returns. And I think confidence also compounds. And remember, a lot of people feel very scrutinised in this aftermath of divorce because actually it's very public. Your friends, your family know you've been through this. They know you've got a lump sum. And they're all slightly looking at you. And I think there can be this feeling that they're looking and asking questions, whereas, which doesn't necessarily happen in and around other life events. People somehow feel they have licence to be involved. They're trying to help. It's not always helpful. We're always keen that clients come to us with a friend, bring someone who can help you advocate, who can be a witness, who can remember stuff that you don't necessarily remember. That can be really, really helpful. A lot of the time, I think people feel suddenly, without wanting to be an actress, I'm on stage and I don't know the lines and I haven't been given the skills and I suddenly have to learn all these financial skills. No, you don't. You really don't. And actually, an awful lot of our clients who go through their whole financial journeys with us don't have to do that at any point. They need to know enough, exactly, to make that decision.
And clients
and from that, they'll make more decisions.
Totally.
They'll be able to make more decisions.
Clients can be in very different kind of situations. Some clients want to know and they want to learn. And our role is to help educate so they're empowered to make those decisions. And some clients want to build trust, right? It's around trust and deferring those responsibilities onto somebody else. And so that's what I'd be spending a lot of time over, is there's no need to rush to any of these decisions. The problem in divorce is that sometimes you do have to make decisions, particularly on technical pension sharing issues. A pension needs to be shared. It needs to go somewhere. And if you don't have a recommendation or a pension open, that might lead to a breach of a court order. So you are forced into these very, not we're saying you don't have to worry about anything, but then a decision needs to be made and your lawyer's putting pressure on you. So that can be challenging. And we deal with that in lots of different ways. And there's good examples, actually, Lucy probably knows the case that I'm thinking about now, where what we actually did is that there was an order that had to be implemented. And rather than rushing to an investment decision, we found a very, very good low risk kind of approach that kind of just dealt with the problem whilst the client got a little bit more knowledge, education. And it was a great holding pattern. And it was a place that she could then receive. And in fact, I remember the email that she sent about how relieved she was for receiving it. She said, I think she was on holiday and she was in tears in the bathroom. I think
she didn't believe the settlement was actually going to arrive because I think she felt so let down and there'd been so many twists and turns in the process. That when it did arrive on the date, I think she probably deliberately didn't want to be there. She was out of the country. And the funds, actually, we had it all set up with her lawyers so that if the funds did arrive in their client account, we were in a position to receive them so that they could start working immediately in this low-risk way. But yes, I mean, we had, and the lawyers as well, had this wonderful email, which was all about, I've gone from being completely daunted and now I'm totally elated. And I might have turned my back and the teenagers have had a cocktail or two and now I'm dealing with the aftermath of that. I can't thank you enough. It's life-changing. It really is.
I mean, Ben, would there be one tip or takeaway that you'd like listeners or viewers to this episode to really grasp that would help them in their future planning and going through this process?
Without a doubt. I mean, planning early, and that's a lot easier said than done because many individuals feel very vulnerable. There's a lot of decisions. Their divorce might be pretty expensive. And so to add additional complexity and additional costs might not be their first port of call. But planning early is going to provide a better sense of clarity. It's going to help them get back to an emotional state of stability. It might help with the negotiations that they're undertaking, or what their acceptable revers. What are the positions that they might have to walk away from or should be walking away from. So planning early, not being too focused on a particular asset or a particular objective. Ultimately, there might be compromises, but having the clarity to understand what those might be. And also, there's lots of ways. It depends where someone is in the divorce process. There are lots of ways one can get divorced, and the courts are really blocked up. They're really busy, and judges don't really want frivolous claims. It's not like the movies where someone gets their day in court saying, so-and-so's done this or done that. Ultimately, it becomes pretty emotive. It's that division of assets. What I think we can do as planners and investment managers and Evelyn Partners more generally is to try and recreate some of that stability, try and put these pieces back together. It's a journey. It's not something that you need to make all the decisions on day one, and you don't need to have to understand everything on day one. But you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it alone.
That's the key, isn't it? The fact that there are people like you out there to help you through this very difficult process can be enormously comforting, I'm sure. It's wonderful to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed, Ben and Lucy.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for today's conversation, and thank you to my guests, Head of Family and Divorce, Ben Glassman, and Investment Management Partner Lucy Taylor from Evelyn Partners. If you'd like personalised guidance or want to explore your own wealth management plans in more detail, then the team at Evelyn Partners are here to help. Just follow the link in the description below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.